Good morning, fellow void inhabitants. It is 2026, and you've told yourself that this year will be the year that you learn how to draw or paint. Maybe you've already given up on that resolution, even though it's only February, and if you're like me, this is not the first time that this happens. Now, maybe you failed for one reason or another, and I'm using failed here generously. Either you don't have the time, you don't have the tools, you don't know what to practice or how to practice, or you keep telling yourself you're not talented. There's something inherently different about you and about other artists, and it's just not meant to be. Or maybe there's some other reason entirely. Now, this video over here is not here to tell you how to become a god tier artist, because I'm an art baby myself. I've started learning seriously in 2025, in June of 2025, and I wanted to make this video as a beginner myself for other beginner artists. Now, I've been on a hiatus since October of 2025 because life has gotten a little bit hectic. I think it is important to acknowledge that some of the things that you see online, they're a little bit discouraging because there is a little bit of cognitive dissonance happening between what we see and how we apply it to ourselves. There's some negative biases that we have towards ourselves, especially when we see someone's growth, and then we assume that we cannot achieve that growth because we are at a, I guess, square negative 100. And I'm someone who started drawing, and I started with stick figures because stick figures is all I could make. And maybe you're someone who doesn't know how to make stick figures. And before I was able to do stick figures, the only thing that I have done for months and months was drawing literal circles and boxes. And this is back in 2019 because I was so afraid of actually drawing anything. I was afraid of failure, so I wanted to talk about all of that, and I wanted to talk to other art babies who are in square negative 100. Maybe listening to all of this will give them a little bit of introspect. There's also obviously an amalgamation of reasons that I'm making this video, one of them being the fact that we live in unprecedented times with AI being a thing and everyone pushing it down our throat, and and another aspect of having access to too much information. Now, this is a double-edged sword because I am an advocate of democratizing access to arts and democratizing access to culture, and I do believe that it is fundamental to human existence to have access to all of these things. Like, obviously I don't want to go back 20 or 30 years ago where you had to pay an ungodly amount of an ungodly amount of money to be able to have access to learning in general. But the harsh reality is, when you're a beginner in any field, it is overwhelming to receive advice from hundreds of thousands of people online, and at this point, to be honest, millions of people who are all preaching that their method is their one true way of learning, and who are all self-described as professionals in the field. Now, when it comes to art, this boils down to hearing advice that is at certain points conflicting. You hear people who tell you draw with boxes, or like don't draw with boxes, like use triangles, spheres, or whatever other organic or non-organic shape out there, and you end up asking yourself, like, who do I trust, whose advice do I take? And you get overwhelmed with information, and you're left with decision paralysis. You're focused entirely on the how that you don't do, and at the end you've spent hundreds of hours watching tutorials and advice from artists without making a single line on paper, and these hundreds of hours could have been spent actually practicing, and you would have gotten better results, because at the end of the day, no one is going to pick up that pencil, pen or brush and draw for you. And I understand that it is very scary, it is daunting to stare at a blank page and think that whatever comes out of it will be terrible. The thing is, it might as well be a terrible thing that you create. It might as well be ugly. But so what? Like, no one came out of the womb knowing how to draw. You can't skip steps. Everyone in the field, everyone who has ever learned a skill, has put years and years of work into it. They have put their blood, sweat and tears into it, and if they can do it, then so can you, and there is no inherent reason that you can't. The issue is, we do live in a society That is so cringe. We do live in a society, and I am from a global south country, I'm not from a global north country, so we do live in a world in general that idolizes artists, and I'm using artists here with a capital A. Like, you look at actors, and you look at singers, and you look at people who craft things, and you see it almost as this god-sent gift to earth. You know, they have something that you don't have because they can create, and we remove all of the hard work of the artist, and that is a bad thing to do twofold, because from one side you are denying yourself the joy of discovering a new thing and a new skill, and you are also removing all of the hard work that this artist has put into their work and boiling it down to, I guess, talent. And so I would ask that you, I know it's very difficult, but to change the definition of talent in your brain, to assume that it's not an inherent skill that you are born with, but rather talent is a thing in your head that makes you more susceptible to learn something quickly. That is not to say that you can't learn another thing. Like, you learned a language, you probably maybe I hope you speak other languages. And so because you can learn other languages, just because it is a little bit more difficult for you, it doesn't mean that it's impossible. And that's what we need to change the talent to. It is not that you are born with a skill. You're maybe perhaps more susceptible to learn something as opposed to another, but it might have a little bit of disadvantage when it comes to learning something else, but that doesn't make it an impossible task. You know, it's a lot of work. I understand that. We need to consciously fight against all of these cognitive biases that we have towards others and towards ourselves. And the truth of the matter is, you don't really need to spend 50 hours a week drawing to see progress. If you can, that is great. But if you can't, then 5 minutes a day or whenever you can, because again, you just want to get started. And if you are drawing for 5 minutes, you're not going to want to stop, because it's a great thing. You're going to find joy in it. You're going to want to continue. And even if you do stop at 5 minutes, it is still better than nothing. Again, like, you just want to start this domino effect. Maybe, you know, you have 5 minutes today, maybe you have an hour at the end of the week because it's your day off. And so, you know, you just take advantage of your time wherever it may be. One of the first things that I will say is to stop watching tutorials. And I know you're gonna hate me for this, but the advice that I will give you is the advice that I should have taken in 2020 and in 2019 when I first wanted to start learning, which is just draw. And I know it sucks. I know it sucks because you're like, I don't fucking know how to draw. I don't know what to fucking draw. And I'm like, yes, that is the point. You just get a reference and you draw. You fucking figure it out for yourself. Because the best way to learn, I found out in the fucking past 3 months that I've taken this seriously, is to just do it. Just do it. I know it's a stupid advice, you think. However, in June of 2025, I cut off the middleman. I was like, no tutorials, no listening to anyone telling me how to do XYZ. It was just me, my drawing tablet, and my references. I knew what I struggled with because all I could fucking do is stick figures, and I don't know how to I don't know how to translate 3D shapes into 2D space. And so when I was practicing, I thought, you know, we'll do boxes, because I could imagine a box in a 3D space and slowly learn how to rotate it in a fucking paper, on a digital paper in my case, and then learn how to easily grasp, you know, the objects, like how the objects exist in 2D. And again, this is what worked for me. It may not work for you, but when you are face to face with the problem, because you're staring at your reference that you don't know how to translate, you are going to problem solve for yourself. And that is the beauty of the brain. You know yourself, you know what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and you can make it work. You can figure out how to make it work. My philosophy is, there is no right or wrong way to learn art. If doing boxes works for me, I will continue doing boxes. This may not work for somebody else. And maybe 6 months down the line, well, after I've figured out how to do things, maybe I will move away from boxes, because I feel like maybe they don't translate poses as fluidly anymore or something like that. We don't have to, I guess, limit our way of learning just because someone says that something worked for them and they are making great art. So that means automatically that if you apply that advice, you will also make great art. You know, it's also to cut off the amount of time that you've spent watching tutorials, because realistically, how many have you watched so far? How many have you actually applied? You don't want to be stuck in procrastination that feels productive but it really isn't, because that's like another way of running away from your responsibilities. I don't want you to go looking for tips and tricks, because there are no tips and tricks and there are no shortcuts. Don't try to find any, and if you do find any and you apply them, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot on the long run. You know, you're not going to be learning how to do the thing. Now, speaking of shortcuts, if you're a digital artist, don't use any tools that are given to you to make things easy. Don't use the liquify. I know it looks so cute when everyone else on the digital sphere is like liquifying the weird eye into looking so snaggy, and you're just there like, I don't know how to draw the second eye, and then you see that they copy pasted and then they mirrored it or something like that, I don't know, and you're just like, okay, yeah, I can do that. No, don't do that. Don't use shortcuts. Don't. There are professional artists, they can use shortcuts because they can do the thing without the tool, the shortcut tool. You can't. You want to learn how to do it without that. I don't know where the liquify tool is in Clip Studio Paint. I think I don't even know how to copy paste and make the thing mirrored. So I know that drawing two eyes is scary because one of them will always look weird, but it's fine. You're learning. You have to go through the bad to get to the good. You can't skip to the good part. That's not how life works. I also try to avoid using things like the lasso tool to resize or reshape, and I know the undo button is my best friend, but I also try to use it as less, less than I guess. Maybe I am using it more and I'm just not aware of how much I'm using it. But anyway, I digress. And also another thing is, do not try to constantly only, trace. Like, tracing can be a great thing if you're trying to see connections, right? And that is something that I used when I first started learning how to draw, like because again, I started from stick figures, so obviously to go from stick figures to being able to translate poses, I had to go through somewhere. And the very, very couple sessions that I started learning how to draw, I would trace where the joints would be, and I would be like putting dots where the joints would be and putting lines, I guess, where the hands would be, just to so that I can see connections. Now, I think that is a good way to do tracing. I think the bad way of doing tracing is if you're tracing the outline, because you're not learning anything, because you're just tracing an outline, and then now you have an outline of a hand or whatever, but you didn't really learn how to draw the hand. You don't know the shapes that go into it, or you don't know if it's in a different pose. You're not going to know how to translate it. Now, I think that's my take on tracing. I think one of the things that we fix it on as beginners is like perfection. You are scared of making mistakes. You're scared of making this thing that is not good and that you will be made fun of, and because it is not good, then you should just not even do it. But the beauty of being an art beginner is you get a lot of passes. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be good. It doesn't even need to look remotely okay. It's fine if it's unhinged, and it's fine if it looks weird as fuck. You think that people will make fun of you, but everyone had to go through that. Everyone who's ever picked up a pencil or a pen or a brush did bad art at some point in time. It may not be existing on the digital sphere, because maybe they started traditionally, or they started at a very young age before digital art had a boom, but they still know deep down, and they still remember all of the memories that they had creating their Sonic the Hedgehog bad art, or whatever character that they drew religiously before they became good at drawing, and they made their OCs, etc., etc. So again, it is daunting. It is daunting because you are putting a piece of yourself, even in your learning pieces, you are putting a piece of yourself in it, and you are scared of being judged. But that's, if there is someone out there who makes fun of you because you made something that was bad, it speaks more about their character than it speaks about you. You are making effort, you are bettering yourself, you are bettering your mentality, or you're working on a skill, you're growing as a person. Meanwhile, the only thing that they can do is punch down on someone, and that it says more about them than it says about you. Now, we all start somewhere, and it is okay to be bad. We have to normalize being bad at things, because that is part of what makes us human. And it was originally one of the reasons why I made the whole TikTok channel, and I do post on it whenever I am painting or drawing or everything. So I have literally everything, including my beautiful Hatsune Miku here. And at the end of the day, you're going to learn a lot more from being bad than from being good. And to be honest, if you are someone who is online, and I think a lot of us are, you might want to consider keeping a digital art journey by taking pictures of your art, or posting time lapses. And this doesn't need to be public, because again, I understand that putting yourself in the public sphere is scary. It could be just for yourself. It could be a private thing, because it's nice to have a bird's eye view of everything that you made, and your progress is much more noticeable when you have it all laid out in front of you, right? That is something that you will struggle with initially, because it's very easy to think that you're not making any progress from day to day. It is one of the things that you will fall into when it comes to any art skill that you're learning, is that you feel like you've stagnated. And so when you're having a bad day, and when you think that it is not worth it anymore, or when you think that you are not making any progress, you can go back and look at your day one, and I guarantee you will see a difference between your day one and your day 7, your day 1 and your day 30, your day 1 and your day 100. And it keeps you going, it gives you motivation, because you're gonna be like, well, a week ago I couldn't even actually draw stick figures. A month ago, I couldn't even do gesture drawing. Maybe your gesture drawing is terrible at first, and so you'd be like, 3 months ago, my gesture drawing looked like shit. And you can be honest about it. It's just to give you... Hey, baby. My cat is rolling on my desk. It's just to give you this realistic expectation of what growth looks like, and what growth looks like specifically for you, because what growth looks like for me is not what growth is for somebody else who's learning much quickly than I am, or for someone else who's learning much slower than I am. And so you need to establish your own base, your base level of what growth looks like. And I'm saying that word too many times now, it doesn't sound like a real word. And so that's like one aspect of it. So if you can, and if you feel like that's something that you're comfortable with, you can do that. And in relation to social media, this is another thing. Don't compare yourself to others. The only person you realistically need to compare yourself to is you. And this advice goes obviously for everything in life, not just art. You're not the person on the other side of the screen. You're not the other person sitting next to you in the bus, or on the other lane in the supermarket. You're the product of your own unique life experiences that no one else went through, and that is absolutely beautiful. And yes, we share similarities, and yes, we can relate to one another, but it is absolutely unfair to yourself first to compare your results to those of others, because your circumstances are not only different, but you deserve to give yourself the grace and patience that you afford others on a day-to-day basis. I think one of the most important skills in art that an artist and every artist should have is observation. And I think it is so underrated and nobody talks about it, and maybe not a lot of people talk about it, or maybe they use different words to talk about it. But one of the reasons why I pushed against using tutorials is not only because you need to remove decision fatigue and decision paralysis from the equation, but also because you want to hone the skill of observation. You don't need to worry about technical terms or brushes to use or how to use those brushes. Those come way down the line. Right now, the most important thing you need to work on is sharpening your observation skill. It is hard because you will be staring at your reference and you will not know how to actually translate it on your blank paper. But the more you do it, that's the thing, the more you do it, the more your brain will figure it out how to translate them. You know, it's I think it is the same mechanism, I assume, at least. You know, when you're looking at a blank ceiling or like something that is so white and you start seeing faces on it, I think it's the same mechanism. When you're looking at a blank piece of paper and then you're seeing your reference on the same screen or whatever you're having it, and then you're trying to translate that, you start seeing shapes where there are no shapes. And it's beautiful because, again, your brain does all of this. You don't need someone to explain to you how to do it, because maybe if somebody does explain it to you, it will not stick. Maybe you're someone who just learns like me by doing. Initially, when I wanted to start, like, you know, when I thought, okay, I'm good, I can go progress to drawing hands, which are the current pain of my existence, I initially started by painting them first, because it was easier for me to paint them than to draw them for some reason. And in doing so, I was able to analyze what 3D shapes I think could be used to draw the hand, and then I just drew so many hands, iteration again. Like, you do iteration, and that helps your brain, I guess, and reinforce the neurons and the skill that you're trying to learn. Obviously, you know, initially when I'm saying, like, I'm trying to show you everything that I've done in this journey, but just to explain that when I painted a hand for the very first time, the first hand took me, I think, maybe an hour. Like, so it took me an hour, and then one hand took me 20 minutes, and then it started being slow, and then the more I drew, the less time it took to translate the hands. At a certain point, I think it took maybe 10 minutes to draw 2 hands, so I guess like 5 minutes per hand. So the more you do something, the more you understand how that thing works. Now, another thing that I think should be talked about is warming up. And this might also be another ridiculous thing to say, but you can physically warm up your wrist, you know, just to avoid injury, and also warm up by drawing circles and a few lines before you start your daily studies. This is something that I think I didn't recognize initially, because I used to do it all the time. And the reason why I used to do this habit was because it used to be something that I would be running away from drawing. Like, I would be making so many circles and so many lines, and I would be like, okay, that's my daily practice. I'm done. Like, I'm not gonna be making any faces or anything else because I already practiced. Look. But it does, you know, if you're not using it as a way to run away from your responsibilities, you do get better at line work. Like, your confidence in lines shows. And I'm gonna try to show you a video here of me trying to draw the same pose, I guess, in 2 different timelines, and in one of them you're gonna see that I was chicken scratching, and I think a couple of months later my strokes were a lot more confident and a lot more like fluid, and yeah, I think that's important. And then I will talk about rest I think it is important to recognize that rest is just as important as practice. You need adequate sleep in order for your brain to process everything you have learned. And other than sleep, obviously, if you can't draw daily, that's fine, because sometimes you're too tired, you're too exhausted, and life gets in the way. And that's all right, because this journey is not a race. There is no finish line. It's a, we're here to learn. We're here to uh, build a very healthy relationship with art, because we're not trying to like, I don't think my end goal is not to make money out of it or whatever. It's more of a human connection and a human experience that I want to have for myself. My point is, not everything that you do needs to have a monetary goal, and I know that we are in end stage capitalism and everything feels like it needs to have a monetary goal, and I think that's why we have so many AI bros flooding the markets, because they're like, yeah, I'm gonna write a book and sell it for like $5 on Etsy, and so you have floods of bad books about crafts. I think one of them is like crochet and sewing books that are wrong, and so people end up with losing materials and losing money because they have bought this thing that is full of misinformation and that somebody else has made that didn't actually take the time to make it properly because they only cared about money at the end of the day. And I think that is inherently the difference between me and someone who is doing this for money. And I'm not saying that you can't, like, your end goal of learning how to draw cannot be that you make money. That is normal. But I'm saying it is the difference between me and you and someone whose goal is money, particularly just money, without putting any effort into it. It's the same reason why KDP, Amazon's publishing industry thingy, is flooded with AI books. It's the same reason, even with that, before AI books, it was flooded by those little notebooks or whatever that had like a design in the front page. There are a lot of these gurus that are selling people ideas of how to get rich, and they don't understand that they are the product to these gurus. they're not, but I digress. Not everything in life needs to have a monetary reason to exist, and I think art is one of them, especially if you're doing it as a hobby, especially if there is no end goal. Like for me, my end goal is maybe to make comics that are an extension of the writings that I'm currently making, and if I don't, then it's not the end of the world. If nobody ever reads the things that I write, that it's not the end of the world, because I still wrote them and I still grew through them and I still got to experience the emotions of making those books and making these characters and figuring out the world building, etc., etc. And that feeling is real, and that growth is real, even if nobody else sees it, even if nobody else reads it, even if it doesn't make me a dime. And I do think that that's something we probably lost. And I know that artists in general have always been the punching bag, if you will, of society. They're seen as not valuable, like they don't bring any inherent value, which I disagree with very, very much. I went into studying my master's in cultural policy and cultural management. I believe that the arts are quite important to the human experience, and not just in producing it, but also in creating it. And it is beautiful. It is beautiful that we can look at the same painting and have completely different reactions to them. And I think that's the one thing that is missing from AI art. When you look at it, it is visually beautiful. It is visually, you would say, almost perfect. Aside from the hands thing and some of the artifacts that I think now it's getting better at fixing. But even in a world where AI art can create absolute perfection, that is still not something that we, I think, as humanity, or the majority of humanity would ever actually find appealing. Because I think what we do find appealing is the humanity behind art, behind music, behind films. Someone made that decision. Someone wanted to focus a single frame on this thing. Someone chose this particular piece of music to go with this scene. Someone framed this way, and it's the same for when you're drawing. When you make a conscious effort to make a line in a specific way. If you watch anyone who's drawing or painting digitally or otherwise, you will see that they constantly change things. That is something that no AI artist can say. Like, no AI artist, and I'm using artist here very, very generously. No AI prompter, no AI prompt engineer can say that they just saw where the process take them. And I say this as someone who did use AI. I'm not saying that I've never used AI. Oh no, I did use AI when it first came out. I had, like, everybody in the world had some shiny object syndrome with AI, and I was so fascinated with it. And I can talk about this in length in a different video, but because I don't want this to be too long. It's already 41 minutes. What the fuck? So yeah, I could talk about this in length, but I did use it, and I did generate images initially. There was something fascinating about it, I will say that. And I also used it at a certain point to edit or to brainstorm, ideas for my books. And then the more I used it, the more depressed I was, because I realized I am removing myself from my hobbies. I'm no longer the creator. I am now a consumer, and it made me sad. And obviously, the more time passed, the more information there was about how these models were trained, and their effects on society and their effects on the environment, on all of that. And then I was just like, okay, well, we've opened Pandora's box. But that's besides the point. I understand the appeal that is being used to luring people who don't have the skills, and that they believe they can't learn the skill. They actually believe it. They believe that there is no way for them to learn this thing. And that's why they see it as a tool. But it is not a tool. At the end of the day, they are just consumers. They're not creators. They're not artists. I think, in my opinion, it is no better than me sitting here and imagining a painting. I see it in my head. I don't need ChatGPT or Sora or whatever other AI model to create it for me, because even the image that I imagine in my head is still far better than anything the AI can produce. And I think that's another thing. You can never make an actual visual representation that you can connect with, that you actually believe is good. Anyway, I don't want this to be any longer. My last advice in this video, is a very long video, is you don't really need fancy tools, right? I know, hear me out, I'm going to be a hypocrite here, because I do have a pen display. I do have a pen display. I do mean this from the bottom of my heart, because I didn't have a pen display initially. You don't need a pen display or a graphics tablet or fancy pencils or paints or pens or any of that, or the latest program like Clip Studio Paint or Photoshop to be able to start. You only need a pencil, a very normal pencil, or a pen. That you can do that. There are people who make amazing art with just pens, and the beauty of pens is you can't technically erase them. You're kind of stuck with the mistake once it's made. You just need that, and a notebook with blank papers to draw on, or printer paper. And I understand the appeal of seeing people draw on their iPads and using Procreate or Clip Studio Paint or Ibis Paint or whatever, and in your head it's very easy to associate the skill with the product that they're using. And this might not be a conscious thing, you know, it might be a subconscious thing that's happening. And I did too, you know. A few months ago, I think in June, a little bit before I started my journey, I was seeing a lot of people using their iPads to draw, and it felt like it was making the process so easy. And so I had it stuck in my head that if I buy it, then it's going to make the process more enjoyable and I'm going to learn so much quickly. I don't know, man, it didn't make any sense, but I was really stuck on the idea. At that point, just to explain, I did have a Huion ink Inspiroi. I don't really remember which model that I had, but it cost me like $50 back in 2019. I know that Huion right now has some cheaper models that are really good for their price, and you can do your own research and see what works for you and your wallet. But the point is, even back in 2019, before I even learned anything or tried to learn anything, I ended up buying a graphics tablet because, again, I thought that I needed this to be able to draw. And obviously from 2019 back to June of 2025, I didn't really use it that much. I didn't really learn anything, and so that's the thing. You end up with a fallacy that you just keep recreating, and you reinforce this idea in your head that you always need XYZ in order to be able to do ABC, but you don't. So I reached out to my partner and I was just like, listen, I'm dead set on buying an iPad, and I don't want to. I don't have the money for it. It is very expensive. It's very, very expensive. And we came up with a digital contract, basically. So I would have to draw for a minimum of twice a week on my days off. At the end of the 30 days, she would give me a challenge, and I would have to pass that challenge in order to be able to buy the iPad. Now, you could do the same thing with a friend or a partner or your parent or anyone who will hold you accountable. But just make sure that you actually make realistic goals, both with the commitment, by the way, and the goal. Like, for example, you can't say that you will draw every day for 2 hours without fail, or make your goal your goal, quote unquote, or like your test, I guess, sorry, unrealistic for your skill set. Like, don't say, for example, that you're going to make a fully rendered illustration at the end to that's your test to be able to buy whatever product that you want to buy, because that would be setting yourself up for failure, and you don't want to set yourself up for failure. You want to build a healthy relationship with drawing. The whole point of the challenge is to have time, enough time for your object, like shiny object syndrome, to be processed by your brain. Basically, it's to stop you from impulse purchases. So you will see, hopefully by the end of the 30 days, if this is something that you want, like you absolutely want it, you absolutely need it, or if it's just shiny object syndrome, which means that you don't really need it and you can end up adjusting and buying something else. Maybe, for example, like you'll see that, okay, well, I really enjoy traditional art. Maybe I will just buy a set of pencils, you know, like Faber-Castell or something like that, and you can end up buying that instead. Or maybe you'll end up buying a canvas and a set of paints and giving that a go. And also 30 days, I feel, is enough time to give your hand out at drawing, without sinking an ungodly amount of money into it. So perhaps you will find out at the end of the 30 days that actually I don't really like drawing. I think maybe I should try something else, which is okay as well. Like that's also fine. For me, at the end of my 30 days, I actually didn't want an iPad anymore. I did have my graphics tablet that I was really happy with. I really love Huion, even though I'm not sponsored, obviously. So I ended up drawing every day, or nearly every day, and I went from not being able to draw a proper stick figure to having glorified stick figures, to translating poses relatively well, to actually making a portrait for the first time in my life. And again, I didn't end up buying an iPad, but I was presented with an opportunity to get a pin display And pen displays, just to clarify, are very uncommon in my country, and they're very hard to come by. And there was one that was being sold secondhand for a really good price, like such a good price that I thought I was being scammed initially, and it ended up being an actually real thing. So I felt like that was the universe giving me a gift in essence. Yeah, like, to me, I still really love my pen display. I intended to use it for a very long time. Lastly, just a last point, I know that one of the things that people get stuck on is knowing what to draw, and I think I have a solution for that. Again, I'm not selling you anything. I can make study sessions for YouTube. Basically, it would be just me drawing on the side, and you would have the reference to look at, and you can also, follow with me, basically. Well, not follow with me, but look at the reference and try to draw it on your sketchbook or digitally with a timer. You would be a 5-10 minute timer for each pose or hand or whatever. Groot, no, don't do that. That sounded terrible. And I would also infer you to any websites free, because again, I understand, like, the economy, and I'm also broke, so that I'm using for learning purposes. My ask here is to subscribe, and the reason I'm asking that is so that you get notified, like, you subscribe and turn on the notification, and hopefully by seeing the video in your feed, it will act as a prompt for you to get into art learning mode. So you won't have to deal with the burden of finding references or with decision fatigue and paralysis. Like, you just click on the video, you get your materials, and you start drawing. I'm still thinking of whether this will have any music or anything like that, because I think maybe you would want to have your own music, and I don't want to impose my taste. So maybe that's something that I will do, where you can just have the timer so that you can hear like a ding that the timer is running out, or it ran out, or whatever. And I think it's just nice, and it would also make me practice daily, because I'll be like, oh well, people are expecting me to post a practice session or to have this thing. But anyway, I'm also thinking of making a Discord server. I don't know at this point if it's something that you would want, or if it is something that I should actually do. I'm open to the idea, so just let me know. Because I really understand that the sense of community really helps, and I think while it is good, I am a part of a bunch of other art communities. While it is good to have a very wide range of people from different skill sets and whatnot, I think it's also important for the art babies to stick together, and we can scaffold and grow together and we can figure out shit together. It's fine. Now, I don't really have an outro. That sounds like a weird word. I don't have an outro for this, but thank you for tuning in. Let me know if any of the advice was really good, or you liked it, or if there is advice that I didn't give that you think is important for beginner artists to take into consideration. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Take care of yourselves.